Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be back out. Having lived in the Bay Area for a long time and then sort of left for the rest of the world, it's always nice to kind of come home. I made a couple notes. Sorry. So here's an image from the show that I did here back in 2012. And it was a really important show for me because it solidified some of my interests. And I just wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the things that it's propagated in the time since I did the exhibition. When I came out here, it was very interesting to hear Beili talk about the way that the project was pitched by Abby, because she really did give me the time to come out and prompted me to investigate the environment of San Francisco's Chinatown. Having lived in Hong Kong at that moment for quite a few years, coming back to a vibrant diaspora community highlighted a lot of visual interest and things that sort of immediately jumped out from the environment that I was in. For example, these are two pieces that are made from reclaimed tiles, some historical, some recreated tiles collected from Hong Kong and also from the Bay Area. And these were kind of two pieces that were included in the show that really sort of made a mark in my mind. Not only because of the architectural motifs that I started to see everywhere. Some of these were extracted from San Francisco, some from Chicago, some from Rotterdam, from Hong Kong, from mainland China. I became very almost obsessed with looking at the histories of these forms, their purported energetic properties, their derivations and simulations across different environments. So this is the collision of two sort of great forms, one taken from a playground near my studio in Hong Kong at the time, and one taken from a housing development in the Bay Area. This is one taken from actually just up the street. It's a air conditioner cover from an electronics store here, and a primary school in the mid-levels of Hong Kong. In the show, you'll see the sister piece to one of these. I started to work with light and various laser cut forms. I started working at the same time as I'd done the exhibition. I was working with a number of geomancers and feng shui consultants here in Hong Kong, and I started to fold in different modes of representing ways of intervening in energetic properties of objects. Here, I've kind of recreated some artificial foliage, and the light is emitted from these custom neon designs that were made. So the sister piece here is in the exhibition that you see in the other room. After kind of looking at physical forms and working in public space, I started to think very deeply about how these things could be applied within the private sphere. And that led me to one of my earliest projects with telepathic animal communicators. So my wife and I have always lived with animals. And at the time we had 2 rabbits. It sort of blossomed to 3. But thinking about all of these architectures and the ways that energies are manipulated by interior designers and sort of city planners, I started to think how these principles could be applied to something that we could live with, or something that could have an impact to an individual. At the same time, we were watching a lot of nature documentaries about wild rabbits and their tendency to build. And having always lived in cities, places where we didn't have access to outdoor space, I thought it was really a shame that we couldn't provide our rabbits the opportunity to craft their own environments. So I got in touch with a school of telepathic animal communication, forged some relationships, and we hired a woman, Isabel Yu, who we continue to work with, to translate construction plans between our rabbits and a structural engineer to give them the opportunity to craft their own spaces. And in doing so, I started to see a lot of echoes of the things that I was noticing in the public architecture work and in the research there. Obviously, there's some cross-contamination between the communicator and the rabbits themselves and natural tendencies of living beings. So these are some of the blueprints that were done. So The rabbits kind of gave their priorities and what they wanted to do with their space and their ideas to the engineer. The engineer then kind of came up with a set of notes and problems with the rabbits' desires. There was a back and forth communication, all facilitated by the telepathic communicator. And these are the notes and the responses of the rabbits and the engineers. And this is the other one. The first one was our rabbit Michael's dream house, and this is Ernesto's. These were pilot tested in cardboard models. This is Ernesto testing out his house for the first time. We took notes on their behavior within these homes. This is Michael looking down at Ernesto's house. And then they were finally realized in glass and steel for a show outside of Dusseldorf in 2015. And I found it really interesting to see how much similarity there was between the motifs that I was kind of researching that started here at the CCC and kind of what they sort of turned into in real form. So this is a larger, more expansive home for Ernesto. I'm about to set that up in my studio in Chicago. After kind of dealing with private and public space, naturally I sort of moved beyond physical spaces and began looking into kind of imagined philosophical spaces. I got very deep into kind of Taoist and Confucianist texts about creation myths and sort of primordial energies. And so this is sort of the natural progression. It sort of brought these two things together. Working with a larger expanded team of animal communicators, I collected dream journals from our rabbits, from a group of hamsters, from a few rats, and a friend's cat. And that sort of lent itself, it sort of formulated in the video that you see in the other room. The subtitles in the video are actually translations from these dream journals collected over, I don't want to give the wrong information. So it was a months-long project of collection and re-editing. I'm just I'll end with the final pieces. As I was doing this work, I was getting a bit of attention for revealing many of the networks of animal telepaths across different countries, across different communities. So I got a phone call back in, this was in it was late 2013, and it was a very mysterious call. It was a gentleman who wanted to speak to me about my practice, specifically about my work with animals, with sort of different spiritual traditions. He wouldn't give me any details, sent over an NDA and said, if you're interested in this project, let's meet up and let's have a look at what we have on offer. And I should have maybe been more careful, but I was more curious than I was worried. It turns out that this gentleman was speaking on behalf of a group of unscrupulous paleontologists who had been systematically taking parts of a dinosaur fossil from Montana to Hong Kong for the purposes of selling it. And they wanted to take advantage of the favorable tax environment in Hong Kong to avoid paying tax on the sale of this dinosaur fossil. This is a massive Triceratops head. It was about 7 meters long from nose to tail. So the deal was they wanted me to turn this Triceratops head into a piece of art so that they wouldn't have to pay sales tax without damaging the dinosaur head. And so, of course, I pitched a few ideas and wanted to bring together the largest team I had yet assembled of animal communicators to tell the life story of this dinosaur from its own perspective. And so we had a series of these seances and sort of ceremonies to call the spirit of the Triceratops to tell its own life story. We also roped in a forensic sketch artist who was volunteered to do sessions with these telepaths to kind of draw images of the other characters that filled out the story of this dinosaur's life. The idea was that we're going to turn this into a stage play, and the paintings that you see in the other room are excerpts from some of these readings. Eventually, the project fell apart because my hypothesis is that there was a bit of interference from the personal lives of the people who had dedicated themselves to communicating with these animals. The shareholders and the paleontologists were eventually dissatisfied with the the kinds of stories that were coming out. It turned out that this dinosaur was starting to look like maybe a dinosaur that had some shortcomings. He was concerned about infidelity with his dinosaur wife. His family was not very happy with the decisions that the dinosaur had made. And ultimately, they wanted to portray a vision of strength. This was a powerful dinosaur, and we decided to part ways. And so the stage play was never realized. So this is just a little snapshot of some of the things that I've been working on. But thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you.